Average year, billions of people engage in entertainment, ranging from watching and playing ball sports to abstract strategy and video games. But one of the oldest tools for entertainment is over 3,000 years old. Originating in China during the Tang Dynasty and spreading along the trade routes to other parts of Asia and eventually to Europe in the late 14th century. Originally, the cards were hand-painted and were often associated with the wealthy and noble classes. However, as their popularity grew, playing cards became accessible to people from different social backgrounds as well. Today, cards are ingrained in most cultures and are used for a variety of purposes, from simple card games like Go Fish and Solitaire to complex games like poker and bridge. And every year, new games are developed based on the use of playing cards, some of which can even be played purely online. In addition to games, cards are also used for fortune-telling, educational activities, or to create impossible illusions when performing card magic. But in the last 20 years, a new way of using playing cards has emerged, something that probably no one would have expected. It's called Cardistry.
Loading, track with the lyrics like I'm bowling. Keep pushing on, keep rolling. Didn't wanna listen, but I told him one more time. Your favorite MC's bronze or silver. These raps here are golden. Cards on the table, there's no folding. Spit bars at the club, zoning. TikTok come to London, get ripped off. Man get pissed off when I start lift off. Sweet like flavors, cookie and biscuit. Round here, yeah, the bars I get ripped off. Picked up my song, yo, every time I tripped up. Little petty trended the big rock. Yeah, my G's do everything mixed up. Full circle, that everybody linked up.
I did it just for fun, not expecting anything, and I would share these videos of me practicing, and I just got live show requests to do live cardistry on TV, on commercials, real life events.
There's a lot of influence into advertising and ways to market. Dexterity and sleight of hand is used in Now You See Me.
You can't really explain why you'd like it. It's like when you see it and it's good. It's like self-evident to me why it's interesting.
Playing cards integrates so neatly into your life. It's something that you can keep in your pocket, take with you wherever you go. It's such a beautiful community too.
What kind of got me interested in the first place is like the ability to create and the ability to innovate and create things that have never been done before. And I think it exists in cardistry in a way that it like really doesn't in many other art forms. You're starting with a blank slate and basically no rules of what the deck can do aside from like physics. And so you have to within those containers, you can make the cards move however you want.
So why does this ancient gaming object continue to capture our imagination? What's so special about cardistry?
It's the manipulation of playing cards.
All the little stunts and little nice eye candy stuff.
I can't do it. I don't want to play with cards anymore.
What?
I don't want to.
What do you mean you don't play cards with you? You mean forever?
No.
See?
Egypt 2700 BC. Probably the very first magic trick has been performed, one that we now know as cups and balls. Centuries pass and magic evolves and picks up different techniques to entertain and mystify audiences. Around the 15th century, magicians and performers soon recognized the potential in using playing cards.
Initially, cardistry was very much a piece of magic and was normally put to the end of a book. So you'd read a book, and at the end of the book, there'd be a chapter called Flourishes. And that was what you would now today call cardistry, but it wasn't its own thing. They just didn't really know, I have these moves that are kind of flashy. Maybe they might fool you, but maybe they might not. So they didn't really have a full name or identity. So they call it flourishes because they were flourishes. They were things you could add to your magic to make them more beautiful.
But around the turn of the millennium, publications by sleight of hand pioneers such as Brian Tudor, Devo, and eventually Dan and Dave Buck led to popularizing of what we now know as cardistry.
I personally had zero interest in playing cards. I met a person that worked with me at an Apple computer store. I just graduated USC Film School, and then a strange young man pulled up and started working there named Dave Buck. We just started talking one day and he had his cards out. He was doing some practicing, and so we would watch Dave do his card things, and he was very secretive and he didn't want any of us to know what he was doing. But then he started showing us, his card stuff, and I just thought it was cool. And he wanted to go to USC Film School. And so I told him, I just graduated from there. Do you want me to help you learn anything, or do you want a letter of recommendation? Maybe we can start working together on short films. And we just developed a friendship based on making short films. I never knew he had a twin brother, Dan. Then we just started photographing his cards. Cards are such a beautiful thing to photograph, and Dave was inventing all of these things that are now considered, the Bible of cardistry. But, I saw them happen in real time for the first time, and it was really just camera practice and hanging out with friends.
The cardistry scene was very different than it is now. Cardists have always wanted to differentiate themselves from magic, and magic doesn't see itself as cardistry, not even one bit. And even though in the past, magicians used to use flourishes in order to distract people while they're performing something with the right hand, when you're performing for people, you don't want them to know that you're very skilled. You want to look as if you're not even doing anything and just magic happens.
The difference is between cardistry and magic is the same difference between poetry and comedy. In comedy, you usually have a story and you have a punchline. So with magic as well, you have a routine and then there's a twist at the end. So people pay attention to the end. But with poetry, it's about the entire thing. So it's about the rhymes and the rhythm, the theme.
Sometimes you'll show someone cardistry and they'll think that they missed the magic trick.
Cardistry at the beginning was looked down upon. So Dan, Dave, and I used to go to the Magic Castle quite a bit. The Magic Castle is in Los Angeles. It has been there for forever. And it became a private club for magicians, and the public could buy a dinner and as well go in and watch some shows. It's a really exclusive place, and it's where a lot of celebrities, do you know someone that could get me into the Magic Castle? To come and have some drinks at one of the multiple bars, and it's one of the coolest decked out spots in America. I mean, it was a time and a place where kind of the ideas flowed, and it was just atmospheric, that it was inspirational to us. And we would sneak in through this old back door. They weren't members, and I was just going for the ride. The old crew of magicians, this is 20-something years ago, would laugh and they would say, oh, it's the card juggler. The irony is that Dave was better at magic than any of these people too, but Dave's just never really showing off that he's that great, which he is. I would just ask him about it, like, what is cardistry seen as? He said, kids playing around.
But I think over time, they just started realizing like, oh, these kids aren't trying to be the next era of magic. They're just trying to do their own thing.
I think I got into cardistry the same way a lot of people got into cardistry at that time was, the trilogy by Dan and Dave.
The trilogy
DVD by Dan and Dave.
Without the trilogy, you don't have any more of anything, I don't think. And it was very, very tedious work. And they essentially lived like monks, like they were in a prison, house sitting in Las Vegas, working 20 hours a day. I don't even know how long, because I would go there and the camera was set up and they were making the videos. Dan and Dave had been producing videos since they were like 15. It was called Pasteboard Animations.
Hello and welcome to Pasteboard Animations, a home video by Dan and Dave. So let's get started.
They had always been making videos. They had always been interested in making movies, and what better subject than your twin brother doing cool shit with cards that no one in the world can do. Flourishing then became a way for them to essentially do skateboarding. They always liked skateboarding. They used to skateboard as well. Cardistry was like their Rodney Mullen, the freestyle king of skateboarding, but with their hands. And it was something to do for them to focus on and pass the time in their small town. They created a world out of a deck of cards. They had acquired so much knowledge and so many things that no one could see that the trilogy was necessary to show their entire canon of work in one place. And that was, I think, their goal.
I mean, cardistry as a term really didn't catch on until like the late 2000s, early 2010s. Before that, it was just like extreme card manipulation and then flourishing. That came in the wake of like Dan and Dave having made the system and obviously the trilogy.
Well, the community in that moment was really small. We had to find a way to communicate better.
So I think just by the basis of how the internet worked back then, it was not nearly as seamless or fluid as it is now. We didn't have social media back then. There wasn't Facebook, there wasn't Instagram. So there was a couple platforms that we all used. Cheaters, I think was one of the first.
Cheaters platform was in the low hundreds in terms of members. And if I had to compare it to anything, I would say that Cheaters was kind of like Facebook meets YouTube before Discord came around and kind of really changed things. The way that people got together with online video jamming was through Skype, was through TinyChat, was through MeBeam.
Back then there was more forums. There was a forum called Technique. I was on the Dan and Dave forum a lot, and the 311 forum.
The only real cardistry that existed back then was the system. So these forums are basically just a place for all these cardists to come in and be like, how do you do this? Like, These moves are impossible to do. It was a place to get tips, to show performances. If you had an original creation, which was very rare back then, you could also post about it there. There was also the Super Hands Handlords side of things as well, which was DeVoe. That was XCM, very different style of cardistry than Dan and Dave, which stands for Extreme Card Manipulation, was very theatrical.
Right, that was like hyper visual with a lot of speed emphasis and layering. Like how many things can we layer together?
A lot of like shooting cards in the air, spreading cards on your arm, like throwing the spreads over your head, catching them, shuffling cards with your feet, whereas two-hand cuts was very just like in the hands. Now it's all melded into one, but back then it was very two distinct forms of card flourishing.
It's kind of difficult to describe types of moves sometimes because there's so much fluidity between them and there's not like tons of actual language to describe it, I think. It's just like inherently very visual.
And I suppose there's, you know, the categories of cardistry are sort of ever changing, which is the best part about it. But I think in general, there's packet cuts, there's fans, there's single card moves.
One-handed cuts, cuts with one hand. Two-handed cuts, cuts with two hands. And honestly, like these are the big categories and everything else spans from them. Then you have interlocks. This is when your fingers together with the packets themselves interlock. It means basically that your fingers are tied in together in a way that they can't escape, and that's what makes the flourish even more beautiful and difficult at the same time. A display is anything that is on a two-dimensional realm and you're displaying 5 cards, 3 cards, 4 cards, usually in a geometrical shape. Then you have constructions or structures. These are 3-dimensional things. You can create pyramids, you can create cubes at the same time. Then you have aerials, things that fly. Spreads, this is like the name in tiles. You're just spreading the deck on your hand or even doing a flourish. Then you have an entire genre where you mix different categories together.
Combo moves. It's basically just me doing other people's moves. It's not my move, but then combining in new ways. It becomes a sort of a unique movement of mine.
So it is a very, very technical and skill-based hobby. So the barrier of entry is pretty high. Like it's difficult to pick up cardistry. It takes a while. You have to be stubborn to go through all of the phases of failure, especially in the beginning.
I think there was a point in time where kendama was kind of a big crossover art form in cardistry. So was skateboarding. You know, there's a lot of influence from skateboarding on cardistry.
Cardistry, for someone who's never heard of it before, I would describe it to them as fancy shuffling.
The artistic movement of playing cards. Dancing with playing cards as well. Card juggling.
I usually say it's like skateboarding for your hands.
I often compare it to like choreography. It's like you're kind of choreographing a dance with the cards.
Just do what you want with them. Just like fuck about and enjoy it.
Cardistry as just like a concept and as a thing on its own is so strong. People have just like progressively like embraced it more and more.
There's always been these little fringe meetup places for card people. And Dan and Dave thought, why not organize it once a year in one place, you know, and have people do lectures and showcase new product. And I really believe that CardistryCon came out of that love of the community and wanting to just showcase a talent that no one was really appreciating at a higher level.
When the first CardistryCon happened in 2014, they tested it out at MagicCon in San Diego. Just did a small, like one afternoon after the Magic conference. And when we tried that out, it was mind-blowing. And it was like, wow.
And I feel like something really happened after the first CardistryCon. Technically not the first, but the one in Brooklyn, where like the sense of community became very strong. And Instagram also became like a big thing and became a platform and it spread. And at that point it made a complete sense for it to establish itself as its own thing, right? That's been like the trajectory that we've been on for many years now, where it's just like exponentially grown and grown and grown.
It's its own world that only like we know about, like the few people here that really understand everything from card designs to how they feel, the stock and finish, like we can really nerd out on it. It's hard to describe to someone who doesn't know that world.
It gives people a reason to travel. It gives everyone a reason because everyone knows that as many people that can come will come.
I think that's very special. There's nothing else like this community. Nothing can compare.
I can't put my finger on it really, but there's something about it that attracts interesting people to it.
For me, it always is the people. If you want to connect with cardists, you have to
connect with people over across the whole world.
I could not imagine doing cardistry in a vacuum.
The community has been growing up, but trying to find more ways to connect and trying to find a place where we are comfy, showing our stuff, learning more movements and connecting to people. And that's the key to become a great international community.
So I know that there are some people who really want to spread the art of cardistry. That can include things like what Zach has done with Fontaine or what Virtuoso has done and the viral videos that has emerged from that, or what Jaspis has been involved with through Kuma Films, for example. And then there's I was just rewatching Tobias Slevin cardistry yesterday. That's an example of a video that's not really meant for a larger audience, but one that's very targeted towards a very specific type of person within the cardistry community who can really appreciate all the intricacies and differences in those types of cuts that are featured in the video.
It's so important that the community just doesn't get smaller and smaller. We need to recruit new members of our cult.
Do we want to bring more people into the community? What does that actually bring to cardistry as a whole? I don't know. I think we've hit a bit of a threshold right now with growth that was really being driven by internet virality back in the day. I think we're now getting to a point where it feels like we've seen everything. So it feels like we're kind of going in this circle, in this loop, and the community's not being pushed forward. I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer to what type of content we should be making and whose actual responsibility is it to push the community forward. Is it the people making a living off it? Is it every creator?
It's so niche and specific. Anything that small requires enormous effort.
And it's only when you're an inspiring person that you can actually inspire somebody else.
Back in the day when I started, everything was literally new. So that was this exciting layer to the community, is that these discoveries are being made where you could create these movements which were truly new and unique, hadn't been explored before. That's why I think cardistry is such an interesting community. It's so young. A lot of these mechanics and these moves that we are tired of seeing now because we've been seeing them for years only were invented 10 years ago maybe.
I think it is good to push yourself to learn stuff that you know you can't do right away, something that will take you weeks to even remotely be able to do it.
It doesn't feel like at any point you've reached a limit of what you can do. You can just pick up a deck of cards for €2 and start practicing.
It's such a beautiful combination of technique and craft mixed with emotion and performance.
Self-expression, it's art, it's a way to get people interested in you and as a talking thing. It's a conversation starter, it's community, it's family, it's a lot.